People who work as security in the airports, what's the strangest no illegal thing you've seen through X-ray? I need to share this one. My coworker's husband works at the local zoo, and he handles elephants. So they take a trip to another zoo to collect some samples to inseminate one of their elephants. So basically, they were held and questioned over a jug of elephant semen. Story 2. How about a full gallon of milk? We legit saw a man whip out a whole gallon of milk, then be angry that he could not have it. Starts chugging it and getting milk everywhere. Story 3. I got stopped and questioned once over a cat toy. Well, part of one. I bought my mom's cats a pair of toy mice with real squeaking sound, and one cat destroyed one of the mice in just the few days I was there. The squeaker turned out to be a disc, like the shape of a watch battery, about the size of a quarter. I put it in my jacket pocket to stop the cat from trying to eat it and forgot about it. TSA asked me what was in my pocket and wouldn't let me touch the jacket to find out, nor would they reach in themselves. I finally remembered, told them it was the squeaker from a cat toy. They didn't believe me until I got them to take it out and tap it. It made real mouse sounds, and they laughed, but for a moment there I was worried. Story 4. I went through security with a Terry's chocolate orange and oh boy, that freaked them out. Apparently spheres suspended in packaging looked just like bomb. Story 5. I once went through security with a Rubik's Cube, and for some reason they were completely confused on what was inside when it came on the X-ray. They had a good laugh when they found out it was a Rubik's Cube. Story 6. As a teen on a school trip to Greece, I bought my parents some souvenirs and got them gift wrapped and thought no more about it. On our way home, I am passing through customs in the UK and get stopped and shown the X-ray and asked why I'm carrying bullets. I have no idea and tell them as much. We go into a side room and they open up my bag and tear open my dad's present. Chess sets look a lot like bullets through an X-ray machine. Story 7. I went through with a carved wooden bull figure that I picked up at a yard sale in Denver last year. First question, do you have a dog in your bag? A. No, it's just some wood in the shape of a bull. Second question, can you step over here, ma'am? They proceeded to remove said bull, which probably weighs about 2 pounds, from my bag and verified that it was just wood. They then had to log bull figure on a form of some kind. Didn't get a good look at it, and let me go on my way. Story 8. Agent flipped out when I was flying with one of my skydiving rigs. He was convinced that the AAD, automatic activation device that uses a charge to cut the reserve closing loop in order to activate your reserve parachute if you pass a certain altitude while going a certain speed, was an actual detonator for explosives. That was a fun conversation. Thankfully, I had the FAA paperwork that explains what an AAD is and shows an example of what it looks like to TSA personnel. I usually show up to the airport 30 minutes earlier than normal if I'm flying with a parachute. Story 9. I used to work at the airport security check, and the weirdest thing I saw was a deer head, chopped and still bloody at some parts. It was in a bag and looked very odd in the X-ray screen. Totally legal and all. Took an ETD test on it also, and it was all clear. Have a nice flight, sir. Story 10. I went through the X-ray once with some socks and phone chargers stuck in a tea kettle to save space. Freaked the operators right out until we took it out and showed them story 11. The airport people did not approve of my mom's cremains. It was probably 10 days, give or take, after 9/11, and I was flying on the East Coast, Dallas to LGA. It was in my carry-on, and all I remember was begging the TSA and National Guardsmen to please not open the container. They were upset I didn't have her death certificate with it. She had been dead over a year, and I took it home with me after I buried my dad. I grabbed it off his nightstand on the way out the door. I was in a fog of grief and didn't even think it would be an issue. Crap show and a half. Story 12. A guy got selected for additional screening and went in the full body scanner. He alarmed in a few areas that were then patted down. We discovered containers of live bees. Apparently the guy was trying to sneak them back to his country to start a bee farm. Story 13. Flying back from Christmas in Mexico, I got stopped by Mexican customs. They saw a couple of odd-shaped containers filled with liquid, perfume bottles I got as gifts. They pulled me aside and made me unpack my backpack. They then said okay, after looking through it all. Then they took a swab and said I could go. I packed my backpack and went on my way. I got maybe 200 feet away when I hear someone sprinting behind me. It was 3 of the security. They brought me back and had told me the swab came back positive for something questionable, but wouldn't tell me back. This time, 3 people inspected everything in every inch of my bag, then let me on my way when nothing came up. It hit me on the plane that I use that bag at the range sometimes, so it probably registered powder or something. Oops. Story 14. Not security, but I was pulled aside and asked if a box set of books were remains once. He motions me over and asks in a whisper if they were. Story 15. Not long after 9/11, when they were searching carry-ons at the gate, a very young TSA agent searched my bag and found a travel alarm clock. She asked me what it was. I told her. She said, "Make it do something." I said it is a clock. It is doing what it does. She told me that if I got smart with her, I would miss my flight and go to jail. I asked to see a supervisor, which didn't make her happy. A supervisor came and I told him and asked what she wanted the clock to do. He laughed and told me to board the plane. Story 16. Back before Rock Band and other games came to the West, I was in Japan with some friends and bought back a drum game with controllers. I didn't want to trust them in packed luggage, so had them in my carry-on. I got to Germany and there was a long wait in the terminal before the flights the next morning. And an airport security screener came up to me and explained that he was training a new staff member and asked if he could use my bag as a test. The bag went through the x-ray, and the experienced guy did a double take but then decided it was nothing suspicious. The lady he was training decided that it was a nuclear bomb or something by her reaction. The whole thing rapidly devolved from that point, as he was trying to hand me my bag back, and she was trying to grab the bag back from him, screaming the same word over and over. I don't speak German, so have no idea what she was saying. Story 17. Contrary to popular belief, there is never a dull day as an airport security guard. Admittedly, some days are more exciting than other, but one moment in particular stands out. A 5'8" Caucasian male, clean-shaven except for a finely groomed wiry mustache. He placed his trench coat and briefcase into the tray, slides it gingerly onto the conveyor belt, and paces through the scanner. Nothing goes off and all seems normal. Well, until something is flagged in the x-ray. My colleague opens his briefcase, only to find that it's completely empty bar. A small canister containing a mysterious powder and a deck of bicycle playing cards, new and sealed in plastic wrap. We question the man on his knowledge of this to no avail, and after swabbing the contents, it is found to be almost 100% pure substance. The man remains eerily silent, although started to look visibly uncomfortable. As per policy, we had to detain him until he answered us, leaving me stuck looking after him for what seemed like hours. For what seemed like hours, he began to fidget more and more, becoming more irate, scratching his bottom, and refusing to sit down. I had my suspicions, but having seen cases like this before, and I had reason to believe he was smuggling substances up his prison pocket. I send out the call, and under the police supervision, we carried out a cavity search, leading to the most shocking day of my life. Sticking out of this man's bumhole was a small piece of red line. The three of us in the room shoot puzzling looks at one another before slowly pulling it out, revealing another piece of linen, this time blue, and another yellow. It kept going. By the end of it, I must have counted 14 handkerchiefs being reeled out. Just as the end came out of, well, his end, the man turns around, stark naked, throws a popper on the floor, shrieks, "Behold, I am the great Houdini," then charges outside, leaving only his dignity behind. So that's up there, or a Beanie Baby last week. Who the hell owns those anymore? Let alone take those outside. Story 18. I am a mere passenger. Had a mechanical nose hair trimmer. I like it for travel because it is tiny and super rugged, solid metal. That's why it frequently freaks out x-ray staff who think it's some weapon part. Once a lady doubted my explanation and asked me to demonstrate the unknown device's use. I did thoroughly. She got convinced. Story 19. There's a specific type of coffee my family gets from Puerto Rico. We could technically get it where we live, but it costs a lot more, so we try to bring it back with us. Well, they were all bundled up and mixed with my clothes, and I had joked that they actually looked like substances bricks. Well, TSA pulled me aside, patted me down, and swabbed it for explosive material, and it came back positive. They called an explosives expert, and he explained that it was the fertilizer. They agreed to let me take it on the plane if they cut open each package, about 15, searched through it, and taped it. It also doesn't help that I forgot I had a card knife in my wallet. I managed to get it out the US, but couldn't bring it back in. Story 20. I've come across two standouts first, being a massive dildo in the suitcase. Knew what it was, obviously, and tried to play it of cool, letting the bag go through only to be picked up by a man. He gave me an awkward smile. The second, being a man, was asked to go through the body scanner, and it had alerted something was in his jeans pocket. It was a mouse that he found here in Australia, and I had to explain to him that he couldn't bring it overseas due to contamination risks, and he started crying. Eventually, after the manager came over, and he settled to leave it behind to go home. I will never forget a grown man crying over a mouse he found on holiday. Story 21. Asked my wife and she responded with a small list. Leopard head, goat in a box, baby bear cub, Freddy Krueger glove, live cat. She also said that there were others she doesn't remember at the moment. Story 22. I'm not security, but the guy getting pulled aside. I had this large piece of pumice, I know it's a weird decision to keep, that I found in Guatemala in my bag, and my laptop charger cable had somehow wrapped itself around the rock. Apparently that looks suspicious on an x-ray. I found out when they had to swab my bag for explosives. Story 23. Back in the 1990s, I had a job delivering merchandise to airport gift shops. This meant I went through multiple checkpoints, multiple times a day. Pre-9/11 and with private security guards, the TSA came along later, they were usually pretty lazy about looking at my stuff, but occasionally a new guard would get interested over things they thought they saw in my multitude of plastic totes. One time, a tote was full of Arizona iced teas and souvenir bolo ties. Apparently, the combination looked suspicious because one of the guards, a new guy, insisted on opening the crate up. His buddy rolled her eyes at me and told him it was a bunch of teas without me even telling her what they were, but he insisted he had to check to be sure. Guy opens the great big plastic tote up and immediately freaks out, jumps out of his skin, and falls backwards on his ass. His partner laughs her ass off. It didn't occur to me to tell him that the other thing in the crate was a few dozen realistic toy snakes. He didn't like snakes. I never carried a box knife on this job because they got dull too fast and the boss was stingy about new razor blades. I was always cutting boxes open, so I needed a blade on me. Instead, I carried a 4-inch folding knife right through the checkpoint every day because I could sharpen my own knife as needed. It was totally legal back then, no issues, and I never thought twice about it, nor did anyone care. Story 24, way home from Switzerland. I bought all my fiends Toblerone and put them in carry-on. Fine out of Europe, but for some reason we had to go out, and in security in Philadelphia, security laughed so hard at my candy, like doubled over with tears laughing. All they said was inside joke as they were packing my bag back up. I was like 11, so had no idea. And my mom didn't want me to ask any questions. Story 25. I was traveling with a purse full of lipos once. They're a kind of lithium battery and can be flammable if exposed to pressure and temperature changes, which is why they shouldn't be flown as normal cargo. I'd brought them wrapped up in fireproof bags and with documentation on what they were and how they should be shipped in both Russian and Chinese, since they were still a fairly new thing at the time, and the inspectors might not understand why I'm insisting on bringing all these batteries into the cabin. I was forced to remove them from the fireproof bags, apparently so the machine could see them. Not sure why they thought fiberglass was x-ray proof, and stuffed them with my obviously flammable clothes into the baggage. Story 26. I'm just a traveler, but flew out the morning after the NBA All-Star Weekend was in Houston in 2013. Terrence Ross's mom was in front of me and sent the dunk contest trophy through the x-ray machine because she was carrying it on the flight. Story 27. Was once flying with magic cards. TSA thought it was cheese, of course, because deck boxes are square, so they were at the bottom of the bag, so everything had to come out. Story 28. Not the TSA, but similar. I was carrying a large bag of alarm contacts in my luggage, and Italian security found them as I checked in Rome, heading back to the US. 2 men with automatic weapons took my wife into one room and me into another and asked what they were for. My wife said to ask me. I had magnetic contacts, roller switched, mercury switches, reed switches, etc. in all sizes and shapes. Everything you need to trigger a bomb. I also had a few alarm system wireless transmitters, wire and shock sensors. I thought I wasn't going home until my client in Florence could verify who I was, but when the senior officer came in to question me, I told him I am the anti-terrorism consultant for XYZ University at their campus in Florence, and I was doing a project there. Amazingly, he took my word for it and thanked me and sent me on my way. I did have some files from the university, which he probably saw. Story 29. Of course, the first thing that comes to mind for me, a non-security worker, is sex toys. But I bet that doesn't even scratch the surface from the X-ray security workers' perspectives. They probably wish sex toys were the strangest things they dealt with. So where's the dirt? What's topping sex toys? Story 30. This year I did a 1-day round-trip flight to get a tattoo on my arm. Flight out of my home airport went so smooth, it's not even our big airport, and gets a lot of crap, but they had their crap together, and I got to keep my shoes on the whole time. Arrive at destination, sit for like 7 hours getting this tattoo. Anyway, all done and make a mad dash back to the airport to make my flight home, and the TSA line is just ducking bananas. Now my arm is wrapped in clear see-through plastic. It's a fresh wound, pretty much, and you can see it's a tattoo. I do the metal detector, no problem, but as soon as I step through, the agent tells me they want to swab my wrap. Okay, no biggie, I think. Probably a big disposable cotton swab. Nope. She runs this bit stick with a cotton pad all around my wrist where the very edge of my tattoo is. It's not disposable or sanitized in any way. She bops the end of it on some scanner thing and says I'm good to go. God knows what other bandages or whatnot got wiped that day with that swab. Story 31. My boyfriend and I were on our way back from Hilton Head, South Carolina last year. They have a very, very small airport. He's ahead of me. We're like the first 10 people. He goes through and his backpack gets pulled aside. About 30 minutes later, after questioning and a pat down, he comes over to tell me there was residue on the fan blades of his laptop cooler. Story 32. Disclaimer. I am Atsa, but I often fly with a sex toy and always get stopped with it. Ma'am, is this a massager? No, it's a dildo. Anyways, I was flyers with it and my bag gets pulled. I go on autopilot and tell him, "It's just a sex toy, sorry," when he suddenly pulls an 8-inch chef knife from my bag. I had packed it in the wrong bag. That definitely isn't a sex toy. Story 33. Not a TSA agent, but I had my luggage searched over an unopened bag of chocolates. Also a LPT for my fellow menstruating humans. Try to avoid going through security wearing a pad. Every time I have it has resulted in a very awkward pat-down. Story 34. I've freaked out TSA with Tylenol that was still in the original bottle and epinephrine in auto-injectors, which were still in the box with the prescription label on them. Story 35. On our way back from Southeast Asia, my family brought back boxes of dried fish. When wrapped, it looks like kilos of cocaine. We got asked by customs if they could take a look and open it up. They got hit with the nastiest dried fish smell, taped it up real quick and let us through. Story 36. I have one. Me was 5 or something, crawled into the x-ray machine, and apparently they saw how my bones look like through the monitor. I have superpowers now. Story 37. When I was a kid, I went to Florida and was completely enamored with the squeaky white sand. I took a gallon-sized Ziploc bag of it through airport security. TSA folks were much less impressed. After verifying that it wasn't a ton of substances, they did let me keep it. Story 38. I get stopped all the time when I go through with my case of 30 cassette tapes because I love to listen to them through my now obsolete Walkman. Every time it's someone explaining to the younger agents that this is how they used to do it. Story 39. They freaked out over my vape. The lady who's seen it pulled it out and had no idea what it was. A younger lad that worked there came over and explained. Story 40. I have metal surgical plates permanently attached to my lower jaw. You can't really feel them, but boy, does it freak out the body scanning machines. Story 41. Not airport security, but I went through security at IAH and they stopped me to check my bag, which has never happened to me before. I'm sweating at this point because I hadn't used this bag in years and didn't look completely through it before packing it. And the guy is thoroughly sifting through my bag and can't find whatever he's looking for. Eventually, he pulls out 2 magnets I put in there from DC and says, "We thought these were ninja stars." Wow story. 42. I brought a Anuva cooker wrapped in an electric blanket through security twice. Basically a metal pipe wrapped in wires. The San Diego airport didn't question it. Then Boston did. Story 43. I was working at an airline, so it was not security, but mind you, I did see some crap. There's a certain quota to how many pounds your bag can weigh without additional fees. Many people would prefer to switch their weight into a personal item, like a backpack or purse. So this woman is doing this, and I was absent-mindedly watching her. I did not realize until after this experience that I probably should not do that. She pulled out the largest dildo I have ever seen, and I looked away very quickly. Story 44. As a passenger, I got somewhat grilled in Frankfurt for carrying a voltage converter. This is one of the heavy ones that's a couple pounds. I was kind of surprised the inspector wasn't familiar with it. He then started a friendly conversation with me, including asking where I was going and what I did for a living, all while the nice, pretty blonde German cop in her bulletproof vest with her HKMP5 machine gun stood by. Story 45. A friend of mine got held at gunpoint by a TSA agent, not the US, country where guns are illegal, because the x-ray showed a gun in his carry-on. Turns out his diving equipment, breathing apparatus, was folded in a way so it looked exactly like a gun on the x-ray. They all had a laugh when they found out. Story 46. Not a security worker, but my dad, pre-9/11, saw a guy try to get crap-stained sex toy through the airport. He remembers the security guard saying it's too early for that crap. Story 47. I got asked to step aside because the full body scanner detected that I had something in my pants. I couldn't stop laughing when I had to tell the TSA that it was a tampon and not a pipe bomb up inside Story 48. My grandma gave me Grandpa's old sharpening stone. It had a handle once, but it was lost. It was also really worn down, so it didn't really look like a sharpening stone, just a long rock with a screw sticking out of it. I'm not sure what they thought it might be, but they pulled me out of line to question me about it. A bunch of TSA workers gathered around so she could show them it. I wouldn't have minded so much because they were all really nice, but then they had me go through the extra security features and said it was standard procedure in that situation. And Story 49. Not at an airport, but when I got arrested for shoplifting when I was 16, I damn near got hit with a substances possession charge or something of the sort as well, because I had an empty medical bag that I had used for keeping my eraser tops in, and the cops only let it slide because they saw all the eraser residue inside the bag. Story 50. I was flying out of Queenstown in New Zealand, and being partial to fudge, I had packed as much into my carry-on as I could. The fudge, combined with my "I'm too cheap to get a Kiwi phone charger," even after 3 years apparently looked like a detonator with plastic explosive attached. Dude first freaked out, and then looked extremely relieved when I turned out simply to be greedy, not violent. Story 51. Well, it wasn't through x-ray, but I have a smiley piercing, and when I took off my belt, earrings, shoes, and bracelets for the bin, I forgot about my piercing. So when the waves the bar over me, they found something. They checked me several times, and we couldn't figure out what it was that made it go off. I didn't have braces. It took me a second to remember I had a damn eyebrow bar under my lip. Needless to say, they thought it was strange and had me remove it and put it through the X-ray machine. Story 52. I'm not a security person, but as a passenger, I once managed to completely baffle the man working the X-ray machine at an airport. I had bought a spiral notebook that had an unusually big spiral. So big, it looked like the book was bound with a slinky toy. On the X-ray screen, it looked like a wire coil with a large diameter, and wire coils can be used in bombs. So the security guy got my permission to open my bag and had a good laugh when he saw what it was. Story 53. When me and my parents went to LA, my mom thought it would be a good idea to put the fridge magnets in my bag without telling me. I got stopped by security, and they asked me to go through what I had in there. Lo and behold, my mom put magnets shaped like the Hollywood stars of fame, and the security guys thought I had ninja stars, like I was some shinobi going to start running on the walls, throwing ninja stars at everyone. Story 54. I worked on those machines for a summer job once while at university and searching people. Dildos are the only interesting thing I found. But also as a test, I put through a gas mask and a handgun, both my own, and a set of nunchucks all in a bag. But believe it or not, it really wasn't obvious what was in the bag from the X-ray, and if I didn't know, I would have let it through, as what you generally look for is large organic blocks, areas followed by complex electronics and/or wires. I was genuinely amazed how hard it was to see a handgun just loosely set amongst the rest of the stuff. Junk. Story 55. I once freaked the TSA agents at Mobile, Alabama out. Well, freak isn't the right word. They didn't think it was dangerous, just was confused as heck because of how it showed up on the X-ray and a bit concerned. So about 5 to 8 years ago, my grandmother was living in a nursing home, years after my grandfather passed. We went to visit her and she gave us some of her possessions, passing them on to us. One of the things she gave me was one of those glass balls with all the cool swirls and things inside. It was a larger one, bigger than my fist, smaller than a soccer ball. Naturally, it's kept in my carry-on and wrapped in a bunch of my clothes. The airport was pretty small, and when it went through, the TSA agent became worried and asked me about what I had in my bag, then said he needed to look in it. I explained I had a very important item in it, and it was a glass orb. He visibly relaxed and said he still had to look at it. So he did, swapped it, but let me come behind the counter to pack it back up. He then showed me the image on the monitor. It was a pure ball of white. Apparently, solid glass objects like that show up in such a way as to seem like the X-ray cannot see through it. We all had a good laugh, and since he was an extremely nice TSA agent, very polite and apologetic, I thanked him for his professional conduct. Story 56. TSA. They pulled me aside after a family vacation to Texas. I had purchased with my own money at 14 years old a bullwhip I planned to use as decoration in my room. I had it in my carry-on backpack, and they said it was not okay, because it was a weapon, and I could hurt someone with it. Now, the plane we flew in was very small. The ceiling was just barely above my head height. There was no way I could have even threatened anyone with it. In the end, we had to pay like $100 plus to mail it to our house. It was nice when it arrived. The weirdest part was when I was going through TSA in Ohio to go to Texas, I didn't even get scanned because I was a minor. Story 57. Just in case anyone is interested, when you travel with a pet, they are carried through the metal detector while their carrier goes through with baggage, and then your hands are swabbed for explosives. This is probably a lot easier with a dog than with a cat, especially if you haven't gotten your carrier back before the swab. Source: move 2 cats cross country, never again. Story 58. Not security, but one time I was flying. I had some alfalfa in my pocket from when I was feeding my horses. I went through the scanner thingy and I got pulled aside. It was horrific as I was still a child. I thought that was really dumb, and I had to get patted down and searched. Ended up being fine, but I still think about it to this day. Story 59. My parents like to collect sand from all the beaches they visit. When we visited Mexico, they filled a gallon-sized Ziploc bag with sand and put it in their luggage. We got stopped by TSA because they thought we were trying to smuggle cocaine. Story 60. My friend and I were going on a school trip and he was wearing sweat pads on his back to soak up the sweat, and when he passed through security, they had to pay him down and take a look at his pads. Very awkward. Story 61. I got stopped once for having unopened Post-it notes. It was like a brick of paper, and I think they thought it was a box they couldn't see the inside of. Story 62. Coming back from Dublin with my mother, we had been to the Guinness storehouse and collectively bought a lot of souvenirs, which we managed to stuff into our respective carry-on bags. Airport security scanned my mother's bag a few times, then asked her to step aside so that they could search it. This was only her second ever flight. The outward flight, to Dublin being the first. I saw on the screen what they were querying: a Guinness bottle-shaped set of condiment shakers. My sister collects novelty S&P shakers for some reason. They genuinely looked like full-sized Guinness bottles on the scanning screen, and as you're not allowed liquids above a certain volume on flights, they were suspicious we were trying to smuggle Guinness home. I said nothing as my mother blanched white. Even the airport security laughed when they realized what it was. Story 63. Me and a friend coming back from Japan had a layover in Calgary. Friend has bought a bunch of electronics from secondhand stores, including an orange GameCube, which is a color I believe never came to the US. Liking it so much, he decided to put it in his carry-on. Canadian security just sees a box with a bunch of circuits in it and immediately pull him out of line. Next thing I hear is an officer, "Whoa, is that a GameCube?" My friend ended up waiting several minutes because the officers wanted to call over and show another officer the orange GameCube. He told me later that the first officer didn't know what it was and was visibly freaked over what he had till another came over and was super excited to see a GameCube. Story 64. I flew to Florida from UK in 2003, and I had some rechargeable batteries in my rucksack for my CD Walkman. To my bemusement, we went through security again as we got off the plane. Post 9/11 was such a laugh. Well, apparently, 2 batteries and my house keys looked very suspicious at the bottom of a rucksack on X-ray because suddenly 19-year-old me was being approached by a lot of guns and people whispering urgently into radios. I was commanded to open my bag very slowly. Its batteries, report, just batteries, and all the guns and radios melted away. Story 65. I have obsessive-compulsive disorder, and one of my longest-lasting obsessions is an irrational fear of letting video games run by themselves. There was a point in my life I couldn't set foot in an arcade. So for ages, I would, before going on a trip, unplug my consoles, detach the power cords, and put them in the suitcase, just to make sure. You can imagine how fun it is trying to get that through airport security. Fortunately, aside from some funny looks, I've never gotten pulled aside for it. Story 66. My sister went to Kenya on a research trip in college, and they actually lived with a Maasai tribe on a game reserve. During her time there, she and the other researchers in her camp became very close with some of the Maasai warriors and were all gifted the warriors' traditional machetes, which is an extremely high honor, at the end of their trip. Imagine a group of about 6 young adults trying to travel through customs with giant foot-long machetes in their carry-on. Story 67. Loose rifle ammunition. Side note, I don't work for the TSA. I was a traveler, had taken the same bag out hunting earlier in the week and had a handful of loose .30 to .30 rounds in the bag. Poor woman screening me was terrified for a bit until I told her and apologized, laughing the whole thing off. Story 68. Heading into Australia from a trip to Japan. They questioned the camembert cheesecake in my carry-on. Mad cow disease was big news at the time. Didn't question the metal ninja star or the untreated wooden sword in my suitcase. Story 69. I once took a big rock through TSA, like the size of the head of a small dog. A semi-smooth, river-looking stone. First time they ever stopped me, but I was just a kid at the time, so they let me take it on. Story 70. Bowling ball. Never try and fly with a bowling ball. Even though it was checked baggage, I still had to convince the airport official that it was not an Acme company. Bomb from an old cartoon. Story 71. I have actually 2 stories, 2003. I traveled to the US, landed in Detroit, and an armed guard, looked military, not regular TSA or whatever, asked me if I carry any weapons, flight coming from Germany. I, as a stupid teenager, was saying, hell no, only my fists. Well, 1 hour later, and a lot of searching and answering, I was let go. The other time we flew from Germany to Spain, and my sister was just at the metal detector, when suddenly 2 armed officers came and asked my sister to open her bag, which just went through the scanner thingy. Well, she did. Then they told her to slowly reach in and take the metal thing out. It was a pistol, lighter, very small hand cannon, which has gas in it and flames at the end of barrel. Well, she showed it, and the one dude looked like he thought he was gonna pass right then and there. Kind of funny. I guess story 72. I'm not security at an airport, but once I got stopped for a last minute carry-on bag search, and they found my pin pointer. But mine had the label removed, and the push button changed out with a small toggle switch. I packed a page from a metal detecting magazine that showed an advertisement of it that had a pic of it, just in case I had to explain this odd-looking, bomb-triggering-looking electronic device. I showed them the ad, and they let board the plane with it. I also had the head unit to my metal detector in my carry-on as well. Story 73. Not security, but was once stopped because apparently a magnifying lamp I had for work looked just like a handgun in the X-ray. It was in a bag that was meticulously put together so everything could fit. And of course, they had to take it all out to find the gun. Then, on the connecting flight, same thing. Yanked everything out, inspect, have difficulty put it all back. At the end of the connecting flight, before getting the last little puddle jumper flight, Had to go through security again. This time I told them. They still yanked everything out of the bag to find the handgun. Story 74. I walked every morning, and one day as I walked, I found a pair of heavy-duty wire cutters. Cool, I stuck them in my Walkman-type CD player and forgot about them. A few weeks later, we were to fly from Phoenix to NYC. At the TSA station, when my Walkman went through screening, I got pulled to the side and was asked what was in my bag. I was perplexed, and when they pulled out the wire cutters, I realized what was going on. Story 75. After bombing of Ataturk Airport in Turkey, securities were ordered to also check your notebooks if they are working to make sure there isn't any explosives hidden inside. So, me who was bringing her laptop for repair, almost missed the flight trying to find a sock to plug the charge in to start it because its battery was dead. Story 76. I went through security once with a backpack that had my Disney pin collection, about 400 metal pins close to each other on 4 back-to-front pages. On top of my laptop and wired mouse, keypad, 2 battery banks, and various chargers. Got pulled to the side and they did a quick search and I was off to my flight. I did see the x-ray and it was funny. Story 77. When I was 6, I took my pet turtle on a flight to Poland from the USA. We had all the necessary documents, but dear old me had no clue you weren't supposed to put a turtle through the x-ray. Scared the bejesus out of the security guys who saw my turtle's beating heart on the screen and turned it off to question me and my parents. Story 78. I buy unique memorabilia from places I visit. I once went in an airport with a gas mask in my hand baggage, which I bought from Berlin. When I bought it from the street, I thought it's interesting and unique at the time. Right before security check, I realized how inappropriate it was and dumped it in the bathroom. Story 79. I freaked out on TSA when I was flying with the cake rounds for my sister's wedding cake in my carry-on. I had them packed so they wouldn't fall apart. I told them it was cake when I went through. They still had to investigate that I wasn't carrying C4 in large amounts. Story 80. I don't work in security, but I went through security in CVG this Christmas, and the guy in front of me had to have his bags inspected because he had 2 duffel bags full of apples, like 50 apples, from Cincinnati, that he needed to carry on. The x-ray looked hilarious. Story 81. I once came through the x-ray in Greece with a lighter. They just did not pick up on it. I did not intend to try and smuggle it, truff, and I only thought of it once I saw it was in my bag whilst on the plane. I still have it, and I never got in trouble. Story 82. While we were in Poland, a friend of mine had put a DVD player in the bag of another friend without him knowing about it. Both he and the Polish airport security were surprised, and the Polish airport security was also not amused. People who work at airport security gates, what are some of the weirdest things you've seen in suitcase x-rays? Story 1. Not the officer, but the person who was stopped. At one time, security and AMS manually searched my carry-on, and it had 10 packages of Stroopwafels. They weigh 400 grams each, so that's half of my allowance worth of Stroopwafels. Being a one-night trip, my carry-on was virtually empty except for a change of clothes and toiletry kit. The conversation went like, "Officer, where are you flying to?" Me, "Rome, Italy, officer. And why are you carrying 10 packages of Stroopwafels to Rome?" Me, "I'm going to a workshop with 100 participants and each moderator was challenged to bring something from their country. Well, can't go wrong with Stroopwafels." Officer, "Oh, okay, have a good flight." Story 2. I don't work at airport security, but I was flying to Rarotonga for a vacation once. Everyone had boarded and we were all patiently waiting to take off. It was decided we couldn't take off due to bad weather on our flight path, and so our flight got canceled. The lady in the seat next to me asked if I wanted a McDonald's burger. I was like, "What?" She pulled out a giant takeaway bag from McDonald's with like 20 burgers and started offering people them. Turns out there's no McDonald's on the island, and she was taking them back for all her relatives to have. Random, but each to their own, I guess. Story 3. My carry-on was searched, and the officer pulled out 5 books on money laundering. It was interesting to watch his expression change as he was doing that. I did not offer an explanation and left him guessing. Story 4. Non-prescribed substances, 12-inch double-sided dildos, straps, oh, you name it. Everything and anything. Do I say anything? No. Do I think much of it? Nah, not anymore, really. 8 billion people on the planet. Every single one have things they need to take, even if it's weird as duck to me. Unless it's pounds of substances or obviously a gun. Yes, sir. I need you to step out. Story 5. A good friend of mine, who happens to be a rather butch lesbian, went through the scanner which set off some sort of alert. The male TSA agent asked her to put her arms out so he could pat her down. He got to her chest and felt something there. Accusingly, he said, "What's this?" She replied, "The bra holding my boobs." He turned pale and literally ran away. Ran until she couldn't see him anymore. She shrugged and carried on. Story 6. I visited friends in Virginia from Texas and brought a frozen 5-pound brisket in my carry-on. It definitely got searched, but once the Texas native security guys saw what it was, they were like, "Well, yeah, you gotta bring a brisket." Story 7. Not working at an airport, but I once saw an elderly woman changing her luggage and her suitcase was full of tin cans. Not the expensive stuff, not at all. Things like cheap conserved peach and pineapple. It was mysterious. Story 8. I was flying around interviewing at grad schools right after 9/11, and I tended to leave a clicker for dog training in my pocket or purse. These were basic clickers, with an open plastic housing and a bent metal piece that made a clicking sound when you pressed it. Especially at smaller airports, looking at you, Champaign, IL, they tended to treat it like it was an ignition switch for a bomb and jump through the roof when they clicked it and it made a noise. Story 9. Nothing overly weird, but you find plenty of sex toys, etc. in bags. First couple times it's a bit awkward, especially since you know the person is staring at you while you're looking at it, but after a while you get used to it and don't think much of it. Everyone has their essentials, who am I to judge? Story 10. My daughter had an entire box of Scooby snacks that must have looked weird going through the scanner because they sent her bag through twice and then hand searched it. She had to open the box and the inner bag before they let her move on. It was kind of a weird day. A few months later, I was traveling with a CPR mannequin, an AED trainer, and no one blinked an eye. Story 11. Whenever I travel to the USA, I always bring a backpack full of Trader Joe's soy chorizo back to Canada with me, and boy, does the TSA love it every time. Story 12. I don't remember the context, but my brother wanted to bring flour on the plane, but didn't have any extra weight, so it went in my bag. The agent took it out, smiled at me, and said, "You know I have to test this, right?" Yeah. He ran the test, got a good laugh at my expense, and sent me on my way. I told my brother he can pack it in his own luggage next time. Story 13. Was the person stopped for being asked why I had a diamond in my carry-on? It was a jewel-ended sex toy. To make it worse, it was 6 a.m., and the guard either didn't believe me or wanted to be funny. He asked another agent to come over and verify that it was indeed a sex toy. I guess he had never seen one before. Thankfully, I was half asleep, but otherwise would have been so embarrassed at the front of the line. Story 14. A weighted blanket made by my mother. I was in an airport in Australia, and when putting my suitcase through the x-ray, they thought I was smuggling substances, as she'd used aquatic rocks as the weights, which all showed up very brightly on the x-ray, and it looked suspicious, as they were all sewn into the blanket. Plus, I did have a lot of medication under it for actual health reasons. Anyway, my boyfriend and I got taken into a room for questioning. Our phones removed and passwords taken, and it all turned out fine after they examined it. Terrible way to start a holiday, and I've never traveled with it again. Story 15. When I was 16, my family was coming back from Puerto Vallarta, Mexico to the USA. I had bought a quartz crystal ball with a little brass stand from a beach vendor and packed it in my carry-on. It went through the airport scanners and lit up on their screen. They seemed to be freaked out, like they thought it was a bomb. They pulled it out and went, "Oh, okay, you're fine." For a minute there, I couldn't figure out why security was looking at me like I was a terrorist. Story 16. Took a flight from Switzerland. Lady in front of me got asked if the officer could open her bag. She had 30+ lighters in her hand luggage, the kind of cliche ones with cows, mountains, and a Swiss flag on it. They had to keep 29 and left her with only one. She seemed devastated. Those probably cost 5 Swiss francs at the airport. Story 17. Not a TSA agent, but it happened to me. Long story, but my dad was really into making contraptions to keep the squirrels in his backyard busy. I was at my local Walmart. I found this metal contraption that held a corn cob for squirrels, but was very phallic looking. So I thought he would like it. Plus, it was $1, so I flew with it. On my flight to Florida, I got stopped out of Denver TSA. They pulled it out of my carry-on and I had to explain it. They thought it was a junk cage. It was weird because I started, well, it's for my dad. He does weird crap with squirrels because I was so anxious. Story 18. Once had to search a carry-on bag absolutely filled with lube and one single whip. That's all they had to take with them on board the plane. It was an Asian male, and after a lot of consulting the books, my supervisor eventually decided he wasn't allowed the whip on board. Story 19. I'm not airport security, but right after I made it through security, I overheard 2 TSA agents talking. TSA 1, I think Dave will take my shift Friday. TSA 2, Dave is suspended. TSA 1, what? TSA 2, he let a guy with a circular saw through TSA 1, why? TSA 2, he said because there is no power outlets on the plane, it was okay to bring on. He's suspended right now, but I don't think he'll be back. I almost fell over and TSA 1 was laughing. Story 20. Went to the Upper Peninsula for a little rock hounding trip and got pulled aside at the Detroit airport for the rocks in my bags. Had 40 pounds of rocks from that trip dispersed between my bags. I told the lady that was searching my bag, they're just rocks. She opened the plastic bag, looked confused, then handed it back to me with no words. Story 21. For some reason, loose nicotine mints often read as gunpowder in the scanners, and they give you a through search for that. One time went through actually covered in gunpowder from shooting. in the rural area I was coming from. No big deal, but when I flew from the big city, it was a whole other level of fear. Story 22. I often travel with small musical instrument. Schiphol really didn't get the concept of an electronic bagpipe chanter, scans like a pipe bomb when in its case. Zadar asked me to play a washboard and thought it was fun, and Trieste had me playing a metal ocarina, whereas I came back home from Bosnia with two 20mm machine gun shells that I'd forgotten about in my jacket pocket, made into ballpoint pens, Sarajevo folk art, and the screener at Gatwick didn't notice. Story 23. I flew with some colleagues to a smaller airport. One of them was checked for half an hour for the metal reinforcement of her briefcase, and the other one for using a sock as a phone case, and then checking really everything in her bag. Story 24. Going through Auckland Airport, I had bought a brand new bong in the city, and it was JN, my carry-on. Not used and still in the taped-up box. It was at the perfect angle to show up as literally nothing else on their screens. A dude pulled me aside and started to search through my bag, looking excited that he finally had something to confiscate. When he pulled it onto and saw it was still fully packaged, his face just fell, knowing that he couldn't legally take it off me. He kept searching my bag and ended up taking my spray deodorant since it didn't have a lid. Whatever makes you feel better, buddy. Story 25. I was flying to France and I really don't know why, but in my hand luggage I took a giant crab bell. Think of those little bells you ding in a hotel lobby to get attention, but it's made to look like a crab, and it's huge. It was from TK Maxx, and I was taking it so when I served dinner, I would have something to loudly ding. Story 26. I saw my tool bag on an x-ray once. I work in IT and secure facilities. The whole thing was flagged. There's like wires everywhere and hand tools that look like weapons. The drill looks like a handgun. It just went on and on. The guards were pointing and laughing. It was fun. Story 27. I took my daughter and her best friend to Disneyland when they were 13. I advised them on proper airport behaviors and we set off. The friend had an insulated lunch bag I assumed was food. All she told me was her stepdad packed it. Say made her open it because something odd appeared. It turned out stepdad had packed snacks on top of a block of AA batteries, no need for them, that laid on top of 3 separate disposable cameras. The cameras, also unnecessary since I had bought them a digital camera, were all wrapped in foil. The friend asked why it was suspicious and was told 3 identical packages and batteries looked like a bomb. The friend said, "They aren't identical. They are different colors." The TSA agent and I burst into belly laughter. Story 28. While on vacation, I bought my dog a Kong-like toy in the shape of a grenade because it cracked me up. Not thinking about it, I threw it in my carry-on and headed off to the airport. Security stopped me and asked if I had any glass in my suitcase. Cue me racking my brain to remember everything in there, and mentioning there was an empty water bottle and knitting needles, allowable, but sometimes flagged. The security guy told me which side of the suitcase it was on, and I told him that side was just a box with dog toys. At that point, I learned that specific rubber lights up like glass on the scanner. Thankfully, he was pretty chill and laughing as he told me at one point it wouldn't have been allowed through simply due to the shape. Story 29. Security flagged something in my bag during x-ray and searched it. It was dog's bone. Unbeknownst to me, she'd buried it in my bag while I was packing. It was so adorable and made me miss her so ducking much. The TSA agents got a kick out of it too and apologized for having to throw it away. Story 30. My wife was on an oral surgery course and had a synthetic jawbone in her carry-on. She was questioned over that, which made her laugh, although she did understand why she was pulled out of the line. Story 31. Agents once thought a container of homemade berry pie might be explosives. They laughed when they saw what it was. A different time, I got questioned about a nail clipper, in with other toiletries, but nobody questioned my 6-inch lace tip, pointy, metal knitting needle. Story 32. Bought a long bamboo plant holder at a flea market in Prattville, Alabama. They pulled me to the side since it looked suspicious. Must have looked like a weapon from the x-rays. I liked it. Had to take it home. Story 33. I was carrying a set of instruments, 3 of them. The instruments were encased in 3 cylinders, each about a foot long, made of titanium, and rated for 1,000 meters depth. They were sensitive to drop, shock, and hence I negotiated with the airline staff to carry on. At the security, they freaked out. A solid metal container with electronics inside, stored in a fancy case. Fortunately, no battery. They kept me for around 30 minutes, asking for what it is, who made it, and all. As this was a very specific instrument, the manufacturer is not popular in general. Only people working in my field of work know it. Story 34. Not TSA, but in the same ballpark. A girlfriend worked for a battery company, the kind of battery company which advertises in the US. Flip a coin, there are only 2. There was a total failure injury claim. Girlfriend asked for the product which, in addition to the battery, caused the injury. It was a sex toy with a set of interchangeable heads. One was missing. Company policy requires the entire product be returned for evaluation. The missing toy part was shaped like a hamster. Story 35. I'm not the security person, but I was stopped with my son. He had a backpack full of Hot Wheels. It went through the imaging machine. Then my son and I were pulled aside. They asked to check his bag, and I said sure. They opened the backpack, and I swear it had to have been over 100 Hot Wheels staring back at them, and the security folks were not expecting it. They started laughing so hard, and my son gladly showed them his favorites. They were so sweet and asked him about his favorites. Story 36. My dad used to work for the TSA in Salt Lake City. A lot of Pacific Islanders fly in and out of there due to the Mormon church. One time he couldn't figure out what was in this lady's bag, so he pulled her aside and opened it up and found a pig and a ton of honey. He laughed and told her, "You can't take a pig onto a plane." That was the more wholesome side of what he saw. He saw all sorts of sex toys. Also said golfers would have huge stashes of cash and substances in their bags. Story 37. Not the security agent, but the passenger. My full-size roller carry-on was searched when I was boarding a flight. It was packed with toothbrushes and a tablecloth, along with a couple of Bluetooth speakers. I was heading to display at a conference, just a day trip, and we had pre-shipped the rest of the display. No clue what it looked like on the scanner, but they definitely dug through the bag. Story 38. After my parents passed, I brought back a lead crystal object from their house for one of my kids. It had sentimental meaning to them. Security definitely wants to know what the completely blacked out item is tucked dead in the center of your suitcase. Story 39. Passenger here. I got flagged and patted down after setting off the metal detector 3 times. Turns out the glitter on my shirt was made out of some metallic stuff. They decided I was okay and let me pass, but never wore that shirt while flying again. I go to get my bag and the lady in front of me tells me that another TSA guy had it. Turns out I had a deck of speech articulation cards I was using with my nephew in it, and because the box was metal and the scanner wasn't telling him what was in it, he rifled through all my things to dig it out and examine it. He called in a second person to look at it who said, "Never saw this before, but I guess it's okay." As soon as I was through, I grabbed my stuff and ran to my gate, which was currently boarding. Morning flights suck. Story 40 was the person who was stopped. They were going through my carry-on that I packed weeks ago, moving across country, and found a suspicious object in the x-ray. In the search through my baggage, the officer found a plastic bag all wrapped up tightly containing cold objects. He asked what it was. I told him I have no idea. He continues to open it, finding a buckton of cool rocks I collected during my time at former home. Asks if I knew about the rocks. I told him excitedly, "Oh yeah, yay, glad those were packed." I asked him what he was looking for. He said, "Brass knuckles." I totally forgot I packed them in that bag. They were retrieved and I went on my way. Story 41. Several years ago, I went to some antique store while visiting my sister out of state. Found this awesome planter of a cowboy holding his pants open at the waistline and looking down. The plant would go in the pants. It's probably 18 inches long. I didn't want it to break in my luggage, so I flew with it in my carry-on. The security people were looking at the screen when I walked through the detector and came to get my bag. One just goes, "Clown?" "Nope, cowboy." Just got a nod and carried on. I guess they were pretty seasoned and not at all surprised. Story 42. I used to work in field service and had to carry stuff with me. I had what is called a flame ionization detector with me, which would look suspiciously like a bomb to the person who didn't know what it is. Looked the term up, it's not a bomb. Lady was highly suspicious of it, so pulled me out. I tried to explain what it was, which made her even more suspicious. And finally, another agent figured out what it was and let me go through. Story 43. I use a straight razor and had a paddle strap in my carry-on bag. The security agent was a very glamorous blonde lady of a certain age, and she asked me to open and empty my bag. When she saw the paddle, she gave me a funny look. She must have thought I was into spanking or something. I was tempted to try and explain that I used it to strop a razor, but decided that would probably make things worse. Story 44. I had an antique surveying transit from the 1940s that belonged to my late father. It's made of heavy metals and was awkward to pack with the scope and all. The TSA agent wanted to take it out and get a closer look. She asked me several questions about what it was, and I was on my way. Story 45. I check baggage my tools for work everywhere I go, and it gets searched nearly every single time. Sometimes I let the TSA slips pile up and eventually I or someone else tosses them. I also wrote "Hi TSA" on the inside of the lid, and every so often they'd write "Hi back." Story 46. Flying to back home. I packed 50 boxes of Vegeta. It's Eastern European, Polish spice mix for various meat dishes. You should have seen the TSA officer's face when he opened my bag. Yeah, he was also pissed. Story 47. I went through Istanbul security with 2 15-packs of AA batteries in my laptop bag. I mean, the x-ray looked, well, interesting. Had a good laugh with the armed guys in secondary. Dumb guy doesn't think he can get batteries in Turkey. Story 48. My cousin once found a giant pair of antlers on the ground in South Africa and decided to try to sneak them back home with him. I semi-jokingly told him if he got stopped, I was going to pretend like I didn't know him. Sure enough, we're walking down the hallway of the airport, and a fake wall opens up right next to us, and a guy points to my cousin and says, "You, sir, please come with us." And I was just like, "Well, good luck," and kept walking. Thank God an hour later he shows up at the gate. He said the TSA guys pulled out the giant antlers and started laughing. Apparently you can bring antlers with you, but they have to be prepared a certain way, like taxidermized, I guess. Story 49. Whenever I visit my family in Pennsylvania, I bring the biggest suitcase I own that is within the regular size limits, with plenty of empty space. When I come home, I pack it as close as possible to 50 pounds full of birch beer. It has been opened and rifled through every time, which I notice when I get home and am unpacking. I've wondered sometimes what the agents make of it. I've done this leaving through State College, Lehigh Valley, and Philly. Story 50. My mother was pulled out at Brisbane International and strip searched because her bra underwires were mistaken for an unspecified security threat. She nearly missed her flight back to New Zealand and was a very unhappy camper. She was doubly infuriated by her kids' laughter when we heard about it. Story 51. Learned an important lesson when flying with toddlers. Play-Doh looks like C4 on an airport x-ray. Got to have the toddler's backpack searched and tested for explosives SMH. Also found the importance of looking through your kid's backpack to make sure there isn't an old lunch able hiding at the bottom. Story 52. Not airport security, but one time I was going to Tijuana, and I had about a pound of homemade soap in my bag to give to the people I was staying with. I knew homemade soap had a high nitroglycerin content, but I didn't realize how that would translate into plane to Mexico terms. Yup, they got me. Showed me on the screen these little square glowing lumps. Holy duck, that's my soap. I dug it out of my bag and showed them, then had them sniff them, because even though they were as beautiful and swirly as I could make them, they sure looked ducking dangerous. Yup, it was just soap. Story 53. Not an x-ray story, but sniffer dog. We had moved to regional Queensland from a capital city in the 1990s and really missed the continental delis in our old neighborhood. So on a trip home, my dad asked me to bring back 3 kilograms, I'm not kidding, of grated pecorino cheese. At the destination airport, the quarantine dog indicated on my bag, and they made me open it up right there at the carousel in front of everyone. And there's 3 bricks of a fine yellow powder right on top of my Bonds undies. He goes, "Mate, what is that?" And I said, "Honestly, it's cheese." He calls another security bloke over who picks a brick up and smells it and goes, "Yeah, that's a crap load of Parmesan cheese." They had a good laugh. AMD sent me on my way with my delicious cheese. Story 54. This was back in 2009. I was flying out of Missoula, Montana, after working on a project there. I always travel with an international wall plug adapter, and this one had an Ethernet in, so if you have internet and plug into the socket, you can set up a personal hotspot. I got stopped at the TSA checkpoint, and the lady has never seen an international wall plug adapter, and she ran a swipe test, took a hard look, then called her colleague over, and her colleague was a young guy, probably never left the state, let alone the country. After about 5 minutes of back and forth, she finally let me go. Ducking hell. How are the training TSA agents these days? You're working at the security checkpoint at an airport, and you've never seen a plug converter? Story 55. I worked abroad a fair bit, and they would cheat and send us loaded up with gear. The most ridiculous was a bag full of cables and IT stuff. The customs at Mumbai went mental and shoved us in a room for interview. They are so incompetent, we got bored of waiting and walked off and exited the airport. Clown. I was working all over Egypt and bought loads of stuff to take back home. Basalt statues, antique masks, and wooden stuff, etc. They were all boxed up in towels and having to go through endless customs gates and check-ins for internal and external flights. I got so fed up I learned the Arabic for, oh, don't worry, it's only tourist crap, which always got a bemused laugh. Story 56. Worked for an airline. Best ever was when TSA set up at the gate for spot checks. Once these 2 jackasses decided to be clever and search the pilot's carry-on, they got all excited when they found a pair of fingernail clippers, practically jumping up and down and berating this pilot. The pilot just stood there. The TSA agent declares loudly that the pilot knows better, and he is going to confiscate the contraband. The pilot looks at the dude, pulls a .45 caliber pistol out of his coat and says, "But I get to keep the pistol, right?" He kept the fingernail clippers too. Never saw that particular TSA agent again. Security guards that view cameras, what's the weirdest thing you've seen? Story 1. Was working in a manufacturing facility that did injection molded plastic. One night about 2 a.m. when one of the machines came on and started running all by itself. I could see it running on 2 of the cameras. Went to investigate and shut it off. Back to my desk. 2 hours later, I see it come on again. Shut it off again. Turned the controllable camera towards it and zoomed in to watch. About an hour later, just before staff usually starts coming in, I see the problem. There was a rat that was furiously clawing and gnawing at the panel. He managed to bump his ass into the start switch and kick it on. They weren't allowed to leave the machines ready to go in the morning anymore. Story 2. Honestly, at this point, I am unfazed by the spontaneous dancing and singing, especially when you've been through stuff like Gangnam Style, where every dad tries the moves when he thinks he's alone. The thing that stays with me is some guy picking up a dead hedgehog from the parking lot, stuffing it in his coat, and having a dead bird fall out. Crazy stuff. Story 3. I was filling out some forms in the security office with the 2 guards on duty. It was long after hours and very dark out. Heard a, "What the fuck?" from a guard and looked up. A whole bunch of college students, dressed in next to nothing, were wailing on each other with pool noodles. The fight passed in front of the main doors, into the parking lot, and finally, one group routed the others out of the area. Guards just sighed and went back to filling out forms. One commented offhand, "Looks like blue won this time." Story 4. My wife and her coworkers scheduled some fun Olympics events for their team. One of them was synchronized office chair swimming, where they choreographed routines of riding around and spinning office chairs. About an hour later, her friend is chatting it up with security, and they are laughing their asses off. They call her over where they are watching the security camera video of synchronized office chair swimming, hilariously trying to figure out what these people could possibly be doing. Story 5. My first job out of college, I used to work as an electrical engineer for a major security firm, worldwide global with a lousy reputation. The job was designing cameras, junction boxes, security systems, power calculations, etc. One of my first assignments there was to help write a report about a security breach at a nuclear storage research facility that was using a security system our company had implemented for them. To summarize the breach, a group of octogenarian nuns broke into a secure nuclear facility and started painting the storage buildings in their own blood. And we had to review the footage to find out how they breached our security system. The footage was as gnarly as it sounds. How did they break in? It turns out the site had spent millions on hiring us to design, test, integrate, and train them on a state-of-the-art security system of cameras, motion sensors, microwave detection systems, and fiber optic fence lining, only for them to turn most of it off to save on power, nuisance alarm costs. Story 6. Used to review security tapes for individuals who were held while they were intoxicated. Needless to say, I've seen a lot of crazy stuff. Tops had to be a tie. I'll let you choose which was weirder. 1. Fire system was malfunctioning and the fire alarm kept coming on every 20 minutes or so. Each time it happened, a lady would stand up, strip, and swing her clothes around. Staff had to chase her around the room and get her covered each time. The first few times they'd get her clothes back on, and a few minutes later the fire alarm would go off and start the whole process over again. 2. A gentleman was not behaving in the general population and was placed in a temporary holding area until police could escort him to a more secure spot. This was when this facility wasn't fully finished and thus had drop ceiling instead of a hard ceiling. The room he was in was more like a closet that was about 5 feet wide by about 8 feet long, had a mesh gate instead of a door, and wasn't visible from where staff were sitting. They were supposed to check on him, but didn't. You see where this is going? Mr. Inebriated Spider-Man climbed the walls and tried to escape through the ceiling. Remember, this is a drop ceiling, and I truly think it earned its name on that day. As he was attempting his Ocean's 11 escape, he came crashing down 10 feet in the entryway onto a cement floor. The best part, it was right in front of a police officer that was bringing someone else in. I got to present that to my boss, who didn't believe me when I told him what I saw. Story 7. Not a security guard, but one time I was interviewing for a position at a restaurant. They brought me back into the office to get some paperwork done, and you could see a feed of the camera at the back entrance of the store. We were just sitting there, chatting, while I'm filling out forms when suddenly a girl appears on camera. She then looks around, drops her pants, and pees next to the dumpster. After she was done, she looked around again, and then up, and then spotted the camera. She scurried away quickly after that. Story 8. Not a security guard, but once at a call center when I was working there, a guy and girl went one at a time into the handicap restroom. Security caught it on the CCTV. And when the guy came out after 30 minutes, they clocked out for lunch. A guard was waiting for them, together with one of the operations managers, their team lead, and a rep from HR. They got fired. Story 9. Once had a teenage couple snogging, making out, against the back door where I work. Unaware I could see them. Managed to get their attention, and they moved away, but only by a couple of feet. I switched to the back door camera, and in my innocence, I originally thought the girl was bending down to do up her shoelace. Nope. Managed to call for the manager over the PA system, who came running because I sounded like I was crying. I was crying but with laughter. The look of horror on this poor lad's face as the door opened and they were caught will stay with me forever. The manager and I nearly had heart attacks. We laughed that hard. Genuinely the funniest thing we had ever seen. Story 10. Watching two guys on CCTV practicing their moves with kendo sticks. It was a train station, 8 p.m., bored. They were practicing feints, moves, finishers. I remote into the PA system, use the force. Luke, kendo guys pause, then return to their practice. Do or do not. There is no try. Okay, now I have them. They can't see the camera. They investigate the surrounds of the station where they're sitting. There I am not. They find the ticketing machine. Investigate it. In there, I do not exist. Now they're looking in the trees, up every pole. I'm 10 kilometers away, laughing uproarious. Finally, they see a camera on a pole. Found me you have. A great Jedi you will become. Story 11. Back when I was a security guard during my second semester of college, I was checking the CCTV cameras, and this guy was juggling beer bottles. The center was closed, so no one was supposed to be there. I grabbed my walkie and went to check him out when I got to him. This man was drunk like hell, and he was just juggling the bottles. I asked him what he was doing, and he said, "Hang one sec," threw all 3 bottles up and caught 2 in each hand, then proceeded to catch the 3rd one. With his teeth, this guy was hammered, and I was shocked and impressed. I let him pass out in the break room because he didn't have a phone or wallet on him. And by morning, he said thanks and left. I wish I had the video to link. Story 12. My mom's a dispatcher and they have TVS for the cameras in the jail cells. One girl was touching herself and threatened to crap all over the place. This is why I would never work in a jail. Story 13. Have security cameras at my house. After putting them up, the neighbor kids like to pretend horrible things happen on screen. One got a realistic looking airsoft gun and pretended to shoot his friend who actually lay there for 20 minutes-ish before his friend came back. They waved at the camera. Later, there was a girl, about 12, who joined them, and they pretended to accost her on the street. She tries to pull out mad sick kung fu moves, but it was obvious they were just copying Ninja Turtles, although probably not Ninja Turtles as I'm ducking old. It was obviously fake as they were laughing their asses off. Finally, one of the boys pretended to be hit by a car. He laid in the road with fake blood for 10 to 20 minutes before a fake ambulance came. They even got their parents out in the street fake crying hysterically. The fake ad they took out in the local paper about the boy's death was a bit over the top in my opinion though. They moved after that. And now my security cams don't catch anything interesting. Story 14. Not on camera, but I've seen 2 birds ducking in the middle of the street. On camera, I saw a skunk go sailing past one of my cameras one night. No explanation for how it was propelled. Story 15. The disappearing people are the weirdest. My facility has 100% exterior camera coverage, and I've got several I can move around as needed. I will see someone I don't recognize walking in one zone, and then completely disappear when they should have entered the next zone over. I'll rewatch the footage several times at different angles and rule out the possibility they went inside or got in a car. It's really an oddity. AFAIK, nobody has died here, though there have been deaths at some of the other plants we cover. Story 16. A big black floating junk. It was about 6 feet long and slowly moving across the ground about 10 feet in the air. So obviously I went out to investigate. I'm sitting there staring at this huge black junk and balls with a toilet paper streamer at the tip. I hear a chorus of laughter and looked over to see 6 to 7 university frat brothers walking my way. Apparently they made it from 5 black Glad trash bags. They taped 3 together for the shaft and the other 2 were the balls. They had inflated it with helium and counterbalanced it so it would float without any up or down movement. They were just doing a prank and it happened to catch a breeze and cross the road to the building I worked at. After they explained it to me, they had a guy climb on another dude's shoulders and away went the black junk, balls and all. I laughed and went on with my business, but logged it in the security book. It stated a large black junk was at large on the property and that some college students came over and took the junk away. My supervisor happened to read the log and thought I was being funny and was going to tell me not to use the logbook for jokes. That was until he reviewed the footage just to check. Story 17. I used to provide support for insert big corporation's camera system. I've seen many things through my job. Register on fire, car being run through the front of the store, thief coming into the cash office and stealing many thousands of dollars at gunpoint. While someone was counting the money, this one was hard to watch. Car crash that ended up with one of the cars flipping. A group of people backing a truck through the front doors to steal the ATM. Story 18. Not weird, but funny. We had a spate of purses having items stolen, usually when they were in the break room. So we set a camera in the break room and waited. We caught an employee red-handed waiting until one of the ladies weren't watching, reach into their purse and grab their wallet. Then we got security to confront her. What followed was an epic shouting match, as the suspect tried to deny that it was her on the camera, and that we'd planted evidence. Yes, the IT guys have time in their busy schedule to make fake videos apparently. She was still screaming innocence when the cops carted her off. Anyway, the crime spree did mysteriously end when she was fired. So, my guess is she was guilty. The camera also was useful in determining who on the night crew was watching adult film on the break room kiosk machine, so that was fun also. They weren't fired, we just added a content filter and said, maybe do that kind of stuff on your personal device when you get home. Story 19. Not a security guard, but I kept finding my workstation tampered with when I came in for work. Cables unplugged, etc. I suspected my sociopath supervisor. He didn't realize I knew how to work the security system. What followed was a very amusing video clip of him waiting until everyone else was out of the room, furtively looking around, then reaching back and unplugging the cable on my system. I set a still from that as the background on our video conferencing machine on the day I quit. That jackass was the reason I had my workstation fully BitLocker encrypted and equipped with redundant hard drives. Story 20. So my dad is the CFO of a major lab, clinic in our city, and he has access to his building's live security feed. It's only my dad and the CEO who can watch the security cameras whenever through an app. One night, we're all having dinner and my dad gets a call from the cleaning crew at the clinic. They'd finished cleaning everything for the night, but were too afraid to go out into the car park, where the bins are also kept, to empty out all the rubbish they'd collected. My dad asked them why they were afraid to go into the car park, and apparently there were 4 skinheads loitering in the area who were drinking, smoking, shouting, swearing at each other, and blaring music from their cars. The cleaning crew at this clinic is mostly female, and none of them wanted to go out and ask the guys to leave. My dad basically told the cleaning crew to wait inside the building, then contacted our security company and asked them to drive by the clinic a couple of times and investigate the shady guys in the car park. Meanwhile, my dad and I watched the skinheads shove each other around and try to break into a couple of other cars in the car park, all captured on the security camera. They drove off when they saw the car from the security company pull up, and the cleaning crew left soon after. Story 21. Worked in a control center for a Fortune 500 company. Saw plenty of good things. One was a woman walking hand in hand with a coworker to her car. Nothing crazy, just happened to catch my eye. She then got in the passenger seat of the car and proceeded to give said coworker a BJ. It wasn't her husband. She was HR, and we had a pretty close relationship with that department. Story 22. I watched a coworker go through the trash can and pull out a pizza box. He opened the box and started eating from it immediately. After eating a slice, he carried the box and its remains with him on his round. He took it to his truck before he returned to the guardhouse. We used to rewatch it for the lulls until the footage was auto-erased a few weeks later. Story 23. Not a security guard, but I got in trouble when I lived in the dorms in college for swiping in drunk. I didn't remember it and was super confused about how I'd gotten inside, and still got caught at the same time. When I had to meet with the dorm advisor for my meeting to discuss getting punished, they showed me the video. I guess I swiped in well enough before throwing up on the DA's desk, then walking into the elevator like nothing had happened, while the chick at the desk just sat there, jaw-dropped, horrified at my non-chalice. Apparently, she was too stunned to stop me, and at that point, they had to wait until the next day since I was already in my room. It was pretty awkward seeing her the next time I swiped in while she was working. I'd imagine security who saw the tape thought it was hilarious. Story 24. I was fired after mentioning something I noticed. For 3 weeks, I noticed one of the camera feeds looked a little off. By off, I mean that whenever a person or vehicle would pass in view, it was clearly fashion, designs from 20 years prior. Whenever the vehicle or person would pass out of view from this specific camera, and then to where another covers the space, the person vehicle would look current in fashion, design. The second day I noticed this, I bothered to look at the information on the feed. Instead of recording, it said playback. All the while the other feeds all clearly displayed recording. It displayed the time but not the date. So in the 3rd week, I mentioned it to my boss. He looked confused but also uninterested. 2 days later, I was told I was insubordinate. This job was for a small town, where I monitored public feeds at the town's city center on the West Coast. Story 25. I saw a lot of weird crap in a decade of being a control room operator with 300 cameras working at a major art gallery. Small Asian male subject acting suspicious wearing a large trench coat came around the side of the building to the front where he watched the people on the mezzanine floor dancing. Subject then removed trench coat and was found to be wearing a white lace bra, white lace panties replete with stockings, suspenders, garter belt. Subject begins to pleasure in public. Events manager walked into the office as we zoomed in on subject to do this. Police were called. Subject was arrested mid-process and trespassed. Lots of sex. So many people thinking an art gallery is the correct place for a quick shag. It's not the correct place for public sex. Rats, giant ducking rats in the cafe, because they don't close the external doors at night. Substances. I couldn't even describe the amount of times I've seen people do substances. It would absolutely be in the tens of thousands of times now. 4 guys looked French dressed in tuxedos, sitting in the amphitheater. One pulls out scales, another pulls out a roll of plastic baggies. Third pulls out a container that contains an estimated 4 kilograms of weed. Fourth guy is counting wads of cash and making a phone call. Subjects begin bagging the weed. Police arrested them. Turns out they were French tourists who were funding their holiday by selling substances. Subjects were arrested on Friday night, so they got to spend the weekend in jail, most likely deported. Guys had sheets of substances and a couple hundred assorted pills as well. Ghosts. Well, let's just say I've seen weird shadow crap at night on the cameras in empty spaces. Ball of light moving through the gallery spaces. Ball floated through 4 gallery spaces, stopping at Picasso work. Blinding flashball is gone. Phone rings. It's the director informing me our major patron has passed away, and if the press calls, I am to refer them to the director. Got my boss to run the footage. Back in the morning of the weird ball of light. Boss deletes the footage and refuses to speak about the incident. Story 26. Am not security guard, but I worked for a security integrator doing physical security. Some of my colleagues did electronic access control and CCTV, and I occasionally got roped into assisting on those jobs. Was asked to assist on a survey at a large Canadian restaurant chain, which was having issues with cameras that they had recently had installed in their freezers. Their last security contractor had installed cheap cameras inside the freezers, which were not rated for such use. This was potentially a very large job, which had hundreds of locations across the country. We were called in to survey a few locations and quote a fix. So I showed up to a location and we had a look at the setup inside the freezers. No big deal, simple enough fix. I don't even specialize in this stuff, and I could easily see the problem and solution. It's a big job. We didn't want any mistake or complications, so we asked to look at their NVR and monitoring setup just to get an idea of the equipment. We walk into the manager's office, and there are 2 managers watching a woman cram her big fake tits into a bra. We kind of stood there in horror, but the guys didn't react. They acted casual, like this was normal. After a couple seconds, I notice the girl is putting on the company's uniform and name tag. And then I see the OSD indicating I'm not looking at adult film or something, but this is live feed from their CCTV system. What is she doing? Changing. He says this like I asked him a really dumb question. Don't you have changing rooms? That is the changing room. There's a camera in the changing room? Of course. Otherwise, they'd fill their backpacks with steak every night. We were dumbfounded. We made a couple notes and walked out. My buddy went up to one of the waitresses on the way out and asked her if she knew if there was a camera in the changing room. She also acted like we were stupid. Long story short, we surveyed 2 other locations that day. All had cameras in the change room. All had managers who thought that was normal, and all had waitresses who seemed to enjoy this fact or were completely unconcerned. I left that company 4 years ago, but from what I hear, this is still ongoing to this day. This customer gets a very quick response time from the electronics technicians when a service order shows up in the system. The executive team did bring it up with the customer multiple times, and nothing has changed. That was a huge lesson to me about corporate culture and brainwashing. It no longer surprises me when I hear corporations get caught engaging in illegal behavior and the kind of mass ignorance that corporate culture can create. Story 27. Not a security guard, but I was involved in reviewing camera footage provided by security. I saw 2 bumbling thieves try to steal from a hospital cafe. The first guy had casts on both arms. He managed to get the cash register open, but couldn't reach into the drawer for the money. He tried for a couple of minutes before giving up and calling his friend over. His friend was in a wheelchair. He tried several times to get it behind the counter, reversing and coming in from different angles. They were still trying to grab the cash when the barista came back, and they had to very casually wander off, pretending nothing was going on. Story 28 was a supervisor that reviewed the camera in the guard shack after every shift. There were signs all over the office that they were on CCTV. Reviewed this one graveyard, and the dude watched an entire episode of Game of Thrones, then left the office for 3 hours. Yeah, he was fired. Story 29. Saw a guy go behind some fixtures and start pleasure himself. He'd move around some, but mostly stay behind some fixtures, that is, until he met up with a woman who was quite clearly his mom. Mental disabilities are an unfortunate hell of a thing. Story 30. I used to work the graveyard shift at a place with cameras and security guards. My bosses used to hold up the centerfolds of men's magazines close to the camera for laughs. Ah, good times. I miss you, George, you crazy SOB. Story 31. I worked in retail and therefore had a decent friendship with the security guard. One of them came in one day, laughing because he'd walked past a toy statue, thought, "What the hell is that?" Turned back around and jumped out of his skin because he thought it was a person. His security guard colleague called him from the shop, and I could hear him laughing over the phone because he'd seen it all. Story 32. I'm not a security guard, but a member of a condo board We occasionally have to watch security footage if a theft or other crime occurred, etc. Anyway, a few years ago, I was leaving the building when I noticed a most foul smell in our entranceway. This is where our mailboxes are, as well as a few small garbage bins. As our building is pet-friendly, I assumed someone picked up their dog's waste outside and placed it in one of the bins, rather than taking it to the outdoor dumpster. Another board member was exiting, we discussed it, and decided to check the footage in order to write up the resident and potentially issue them a fine for a bylaw infraction. We didn't expect what we saw when we watched the footage. An elderly woman was leaving the building with someone else when she suddenly ran back and started frantically buzzing someone to be let back in. They must have been taking too long because the woman then dropped her pants, bent over the small garbage bin nearest her and took a crap. The resident she was buzzing eventually came down and escorted her to her suite. We watched the video in stunned silence, later deciding to write a letter asking the resident to clean the area, which they did. The following morning when I went down, all I could smell was bleach. Story 33, obligatory not security but homeowner who went on vacation. We have a cop friend who agreed to set up cameras to watch the house while we were away. Our house was built in the 1800s and cop friend believes it to be haunted. It isn't. We came home and cop friend removes cameras. He reviews the footage and finds my sister and her husband doing the diddly on our kitchen counter. It's worth noting, I really don't like sister's husband at all. Thanks, sis. Story 34. Not a security guard, but my dad has a trail cam that was pointed towards the alley behind our house. One night, two people showed up dressed up in animal costumes, I think a mouse and a raccoon, and started dancing and doing other weird crap. Turns out it was their friends from a few houses down. Story 35. Oh, I have a few. I know they aren't weird, but it's the typical college crap. Kids dumping goldfish into one of the fountains. One girl streaking, a couple having sex. The female was not into it, bored, and the guy was giving it his all. My overall favorite, though, is a wholesome one. It was at a dorm's main entrance. Some students were hanging out and smoking. I think fall, almost winter. Anyways, there's a kitten just doing kitten thing, just killing time. The door opens as someone comes outside. Kitten sees the opportunity and bolts inside. Took them about 30 minutes to get it back outside. Story 36. My OH is a security guard in an old building here in the UK. I can't say what city, as his work have all but put a gagging order on it, but it's a cathedral city in the east of England. The cathedral predates 1200 AD. They have motion-activated cameras and have caught so many orbs, lights, and other paranormal phenomena. Underneath the building, there is said to be hidden passages that monks used to conceal themselves moving to, from the cathedral to the building, which I think was part of their accommodation. The phenomena all move towards the direction of the cathedral. I have contacts with a paranormal investigator, and my OH has been in touch with a team in London who are really interested in visiting and setting up some equipment. But the council, who own the building, refuses to allow this to take place. They have hours and hours of footage, but can't do anything with it. It's very frustrating for the whole team who want answers. Story 37. Not security, but was down at the security office, looking at the cameras. I worked about 2 minutes up the hall, and from the camera, I saw myself still working. Apparently, there was a 6-minute delay because everything is recorded and they get the feedback. I was absolutely mortified to see myself still standing there. Story 38. Maybe not weird, but hilarious. I was security out in the boonies. Our site was taken over by a pair of Canada geese. I was morning crew and watched my co-worker on the camera as he walked to his car. Except he didn't make it. One of the geese came flying into frame and absolutely bombed him. Bless his heart. He was from some part of Africa that doesn't have giant pissed-off attack birds. I went out to scare them off and rewound the video to see what I'd missed. I wish I'd gotten the video and added the Benny Hill soundtrack because in the time it took me to get out to that parking lot, the goose was chasing him around in circles. He was swinging his soft lunchbox at it as he ran. I laughed so hard I cried. Story 39. Aside from the bird building, its nest on camera 36, the weirdest thing was the drunk guy who got dropped off at work, made it halfway to the door, lost his balance, and fell over. He took out a trash can in the process. At almost the same time, his team leader walks up to my office, asking if he had called in. I told him to check the sidewalk. Guy lost his job very quickly. Story 40. Not a security guard, but my mom's office now has a permanent record of her throwing her office phone while on the phone with a client, booking it out of her office, screaming, then proceeding to break down and cry in the hallway while everyone poked their heads out of their own respective offices. A cicada landed on her leg. Story 41. I regularly see females urinating next to my office block as if they think that is a private place. They just drop trousers, pants, and go. The males seem more likely to find a genuinely discreet place to urinate outdoors. Story 42. Guy pulls over right under a 360 cam, opens his door, and starts to take a leak. Mid-piss, he sees the camera. You see him mouth, "Damn," and before he even puts his ding-a-ling away, he drives off. It was hilarious. Story 43. Once, on a late Tuesday eve, I saw about 10 men suddenly stroll into the store. They were dressed in all black, and all had chicken masks on. I was freaking out because I thought they were going to rob the place. But no, they just walked to the back of the store and stood around for about 5 minutes. I was scared crapless, so I didn't dare to leave the security room. Suddenly, one fellow raised his right hand. This made me jump because they had been still as statues for the past 5 minutes. All the other guys reached into their pockets and pulled out needles. They then prepared what appeared to be substances. Suddenly, they formed a little circle and injected the person directly to their right's jugular vein with substances. At this point, I was more confused as to what the duck was going on than scared. After injecting, they just ducking left. Nobody was at the front register, and I was the only person there. Nobody believes me when I tell them, and I'm sure no one here will either, but I'm sure it happened. I'm not crazy, I swear. Story 44. The security guard at our high school saw someone wearing a skirt squatting crap in the middle of a passing period. It is a big school with 3,000 kids, and apparently no one else saw until there was a literal pile of crap in the middle of the hallway. Story 45. I'm a corrections officer, and when I'm in a control booth, we can watch the inmates through a camera. We can also see them through the windows, which are tinted so they can't see us. I was obviously sitting, being lazy, watching my guys through the camera, and I saw a man stripped down to his boxers, while several other inmates vigorously scrubbed him with soap. He seemed fine with this. My only guess was that he had bad hygiene and the other guys were helping him out. I also had a female inmate take off her jumper and twerk upside down on a window while the others cheered her on. Had to put a stop to that one. Story 46. I worked in a small clinic as a receptionist. I watched over the cameras. Nothing crazy happens, but I watched a Jersey Shore wannabe yell at her phone at her boyfriend for 10 minuets in a hallway. Story 47. I saw a woman in a Supergirl costume go through an unlocked door, go to an empty counter to try to order something. Store was closed. Only the night staff were in. She looked for someone to take her order. Couldn't find anyone and left. Honestly, the weirdest thing was the timing of it all. It was June, so the Supergirl costume was a little out of place. Story 48. Obligatory. Not a guard, but I watch a lot of cameras. Watched a gentleman in a populated outdoor area slap at his arm, jerk around a bit, slap himself in the face, raise his arms to the sky, take off running, and proceeded to rip his shirt off and do the slappy dance. Wasp had crawled up his sleeve. Bonus. Got to watch an instance in which I was helping someone select paint. She yanked a gallon off of a high shelf, causing another gallon to fly off and smash open on the floor, coating my lower half in a nice satin latex coating. Watching my little sway as the paint hit me, then watching us both die inside was priceless. Story 49. As a former LP at a Walmart in my early 20s, I watched Grandma get run over by a Dodge Ram on Christmas Eve. The police came and took a copy of the tape, then her lawyers came and took another copy after subpoena. Story 50. I was a part of a few restaurant openings, but the worst one we did was in Atlanta. Part of our policy was end of the night we pulled all the drawers, cash, and stuck them in the safe, leaving registers opened. That way, they wouldn't attempt breaking them open. So I get called in by our GM because the alarm has gone off. I was within walking distance and get there first. I'm welcomed by 2 cops, and our front door is shattered. We walk up, review the security footage, and I guess it was worth the laugh. Guy sprints from out of the darkness across the street with the biggest rock he can find. Throws that MF and the glass on the door just explodes like in the movies. Without stopping, he lunges through the window, slides to the register, and sees it's open with nothing there. Panic mode set in as this guy looks everywhere. Alarm is going off, and he is straight losing it as his master plan falls apart. So our thing was we just had a giant glass jar of Tootsie Rolls, and they were free. People would just take a handful with their meal. This man locks his eyes on the Tootsie Roll bin, snatches it up, and just bolts out the door and right back into the darkness from which he came. End of story is cops gather the facts and go on a 2-hour patrol to look for any bandits with Tootsie Rolls on them. Insurance fixes the door, and we all move on. I just hope that man, wherever he is, knows I want that ducking jar back. Story 51. I had a call from some tenants, property manager here, that their clothes smells like urine after they dry them. Check the cameras and someone's kid peed in a dryer, story 52. So I can't speak of where I worked, but I worked security for a company. And the facility I overlooked had about 70+ camera running throughout the whole facility. The funniest crap I ever saw was this guy standing in a hallway on the phone. Dude's talking and whatnot, looks around, sees he's alone, and starts digging in his ass crack inside his pants. I'm talking homeboy was digging deep, y'all. So buddy turns around and looks again, making sure he's still alone, goes in his pants, starts fondling his package, and then sniffs and licks his damn fingers. This MF is still on the phone, looking around, looks up and notices the camera, and the look of defeat on that man's face when he realized that all of that was just on camera. Ducking priceless, I never shook that ducker's hand ever again. Story 53. Not a security guard, but here's this story about this man that broke into the restaurant, stripped naked, ate noodles he brought from home, and play. They caught the footage because they were investigating another separate break-in. Before you ask, yes, this was in Florida. Story 54. I'm not a security guard, but I did work for a casino a while back. And you see some weird stuff on camera. The most memorable one. 1. Watched a guy break into a car at 1 a.m. I called the manager, he had me call the police, and they were arrested. 2. Watched a drunk guy walk across the road and then get hit by a car. I called 911 and then called the manager. I made a copy of the hit and run for police. 3. Watched a dog enter the casino and run around for a bit before being let out. Had to make copies of that and send to manager with incident report. 4. Also watched a guy leave his infant in the car and informed the manager when I watched the same guy sit down at the poker table. After it was clear he was not going to be going back to the car, infant police were called and he was taken out by the police. Story 55. My dad is a security guard, and a few years ago I was at his work waiting for my mom to pick us up there. While bored in the camera room, I was watching the cameras and noticed in a hallway some doors opening. He works overnight, so no one was there. It's those automatic doors that open you step in front of them. And the doors just opened and closed. Thought it was creepy. I still have the recording I took of it from my phone. Story 56. Worked security at a self-storage unit for years. Normally do my rounds a few times before sitting and watching. I just finished a round walking, and as I was starting to read my book, some dude ended up stuck in one of the open spaces waving a makeshift help sign. I let him out and wonder how he broke in. Didn't even call the cops, as it wasn't worth the hassle. Story 57. I was working the night shift at Chuck E. Cheese, and on my first night Chucky moved. I did no notice until it moved while watching it. I go and check it out. Turns out it was the technician playing a prank on me. Story 58. I used to work at a secured mental health unit ran by the state. Our cameras were down during this incident, but I still wonder if they would have helped explain anything. The whole thing gave me the willies. I was probably the creepiest thing I've ever had happen to me while working there. I worked third shift. It was a few nights before Halloween. I was tasked with sitting outside a juvenile's room. She was recently in the news nationwide for an unprovoked attack on a classmate. She blamed her actions on a fictional character who was predominantly featured online. We will call him Lanky Man. The juvenile was in the process of getting ready for bed when I arrived. PJs on, she turned to shut her door, and right before the door latched, she whispered to me, "Lanky Man comes to see me every night." I, internally, roll my eyes and tell her goodnight before settling into my squishy plastic chair, and I open my book. In the darkened hallway of a 100-year-old mental hospital. A few nights before Halloween. 3 a.m. rolls around and the hospital is quiet. I'm still sitting on my chair outside juvenile's room. The halogen bulb of the light above me starts to hum. I stare at it. It intensifies. Pop! All the lights of the hallway go out, and for a brief second, I'm plunged into complete darkness. But I still hear the hum. What I first suspected was the swan song of a dying light bulb, now resembles the sound of static. The emergency lights pop on and my coworker passes by me on a census round. We chat a bit before he brings up the sound. He asks if I hear it. Yep. I watch him quietly open up patient rooms looking for the source. We decide it's likely a clock radio. Most radios struggle to connect to any station inside the hospital. I suspect ancient lead paint and asbestos may be to blame. However, many patients thrive when they keep themselves on strict routines, so the hospital provides them. About 10 minutes of unfruitful searching passes before we share a look of sudden understanding, and I'm certain our thoughts were synchronized. The power is out. 10 seconds of complete silence pass between us. Bricks may have been shat. I opened my mouth to vomit forth the first of many, "What the heck?" But we silently decided that neither of us really wanted to know. We never discussed the incident afterward. BTW, the power outage, was caused by a coworker driving back from lunch, slid off the road into a power line. That was her second DUI that year. She got the first one while transporting patients. Weird place to work. Story 59. Hoo boy, I was swing shift operations supervisor for 3 years at a mixed-use property, office, residential. It had started out as a large office complex with 2 office towers. Then they decided to build 3 multi-story apartment buildings in the giant parking lot that surrounded one of the buildings. There was camera coverage around the exterior of the apartments and in the common areas as well. Then I had one tilt, zoom camera located down between some older office buildings away from the core of everything. There were also 2 transit stations adjacent to the property, 1 light rail and 1 streetcar. I've seen some stuff. Called the cops several times when I saw guys with guns. 2 I remember distinctly were groups of kids where one guy just pulled out a gun to show his friends that he had it. Cops didn't catch up to either group as far as I know. The PTZ camera was located down by an alleyway, walking path that had some benches. I spotted a couple of meth heads shooting up down there and dispatched my guys to run them off. Then I saw the female pull a gun out of her backpack, backed the guys off, and called the police. Of course, it turned out to be a toy. PTZ camera watching the benches. Guy strolls up and takes a seat, takes off his shoes and socks, and proceeds to shave his feet. Top and bottom, same camera. Street kid walks up and starts digging through the trash can. Apparently, he found something interesting in the way of a magazine because he sat right down next to the trash can and started beating it. Also had a PTZ up high on one corner of the office tower. I get a call one day from one of the property management folks. He thinks he saw a hawk land up there. I flip the camera around, and sure enough, I'm lens to eye with a red tail hawk. Fortunately, I couldn't see the camera move in the dome, so it wasn't scared off. It could hear it, though. Kept cocking, its head to the side, looking right at the camera. One of the common areas was a spa that included a hot tub and a couple of saunas. Had to send the building concierge up there numerous times for people getting naughty. And it wasn't as if the camera was hidden. Had to do an investigation when a resident reported their Dodds missing. Sure enough, some asshole had come along and took it out of his fenced-in porch area, ground floor. Cops were called, and I showed an officer what we had. He said that he might recognize the guy. Don't know if the police involvement helped, but early the next morning, the guy put the dog back on the porch. Story 60. Not a security guard, and neither is the person in this story, but it's still sort of related, so I may as well share it even though nobody's gonna see this prolil. It's a story my dad told me a little while back. He once worked at a little dollar store with a couple of other people. We'll call them Jake and Lisa. He mostly worked the register, and he and one of the other employees would stay at night and empty out the cash registers and stuff in this room in the back that had a bunch of screens in it where you could watch what the security cameras were filming. This store had a lot of weird stuff happening in it though. At night, whenever all the customers left, the lights would start to flicker like in Stranger Things or something. And sometimes things would mysteriously fall off of shelves too, like things that were super far back on the shelves with nobody nearby. One night, my dad and Jake were in the back of the store, emptying out the registers like always. And Jake said he saw something running by on one of the security camera screen things, but he couldn't tell what it was. My dad looked up, but he didn't see anything. They searched the store and didn't find anything. This happened a few more times within the next couple of weeks. Then, one night, when he was in the back of the store with Lisa, they both caught something running by on a screen. Just a sort of tall, shadowy humanoid figure. They went to search the store and found that an entire shelf had been emptied, with everything that it held on the ground now. They looked around for longer, and Lisa suddenly got scared and told my dad that she saw something running past them. They went looking for it, and again there was nothing. Then Lisa turned and saw a freezer door closing like somebody went in there. She ran over and tried to open it, but it was stuck. My dad tried, and he couldn't get it open either. They both tried it together, and they started to open it for a second, but it was suddenly pulled shut from the inside. So they used all their strength and finally got it all the way open, looked inside, and it was totally empty. It was pretty weird. My dad's always been a skeptic and doesn't really believe in ghosts or anything, but I don't know what he must have thought of all that. Story 61. Someone at another site staring directly into the camera for over half an hour. No guard was at the site I was viewing. Phoned the police as I did not recognize the man. The report afterwards was that the man just stated he zoned out while thinking about what he should make for dinner. I don't believe it because this stood unmoving, and I'm pretty sure he saw a part of my soul through the camera. Story 62. Obligatory, not a guard, but a bus dispatcher with access to the cameras in the buses. Drunk girl passing out in the bus seat and proceeding to crap, waking up and sitting up on said pile of crap, sticking her fingers in it and smelling it, then proceeding to fling it all over the bus. The bus smelled like crap for a week, even after we'd cleaned, disinfected, and deodorized it. Story 63. Saw a 20-something woman taking a crap on a park bench last week. It wasn't even subtly. It was behind the library, in view of the main road, so a lot of people use that route. She just pulled down her pants and started taking a crap while her friend pulled out her phone and started recording. Then another one of her friends showed up and started joking around, pretending to give her a lap dance, jump on her, etc. Then he took out his phone and started taking pictures too. Trashiest ducking thing I'd ever seen. Story 64. Not a security guard, just used to be a lazy-ass kid who worked at an arcade and probably spent more time in the office watching the cameras than actually working. We would have a young special needs couple come in at least 2 to 3 times a week. Apparently they were into some kinky stuff because I could usually find them on the cameras, hiding behind one of the arcade machines, him on his knees, licking her elbows. Story 65. Worked loss prevention at a grocery store and had a creepy acting guy wander into the natural beauty products section, grabbed one of the tester bottles of lotion, squirted a large amount into his hand, reached into his pants and rubbed it on his junk while walking around the store. Story 66. I used to work at a mall at guest services. One day I get a call to come up to security where I'm shown a video of 2 night guards racing around the mall in the wheelchairs that we lend out. Story 67. Currently a security guard that stares at cameras. Once saw a gentleman crap into a trash can, and then penguin waddle into the woods nearby with his pants around his ankles. Godspeed. Story 68. I worked at a Twin Peaks, and our favorite thing was to roll the cameras back and watch guys walking into walls, doors, tables, because they were too busy ogling. Story 69. Was security for big buildings usually doing night shift? It was a big building with one side of the wall, mostly window, glass. The area I was working was industrial near an airport, so at night silent and pretty creepy. As my shift from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. got me bored out of my skull quickly, and I had already done my taxes and such, I started watching, next to the cameras of course, a horror movie. Bad idea. At a point I saw people shuffling alongside the building. It was a group of about 20. I could follow them on the monitors. They came to the glass part of the building and started banging on the windows. I was not that startled as I did see them coming, but the monitors are gritty quality and did not alert me that they were all in makeup. Bloody zombie bachelor party. One of them had to go to the bathroom and they were all pretty wasted. So I had about 20 drunk zombies in my office waiting to use the bathroom. After that, they asked me the way to the nearest bus stop and then they shuffled and moaned happily on their way. Hope the guy had a fun wedding. Story 70. I've seen a guy get run over by a lorry, seen lots of ducking, lots of substances used. But one that sticks out is when I had to go through footage to find a motorcycle accident. This poor biker and his passenger went into the front of a van and both died. All I was told was that they need the footage of the accident. Safe to say I was shook to my core and felt sick for days after. Story 71. A friend of mine is an employee at a theme park. Her job is to watch the camera for the laser shooter ride. She saw a guy, adult, not a teenager, pull out his junk and pretend to shoot the targets with it. All of his friends were just laughing. They got escorted out. Story 72. I saw a video posted online from a public security camera. It was from my hometown. A friend of mine getting blown by some girl behind a pub. You go, Greg. Story 73. Not a guard, but one of our classmates has this idea where we stand in front of the camera and just stare back. There were more than 10 of us doing it. Story 74. I'm not a security guard, but I worked at an airport for some time, which required to go over some security check because I was regularly going to those zones where passenger already went through security checks. As a part of this check, they showed us some security footage of what we shouldn't definitely ever do and report it if we see such behavior. 1. A tourist that was late on airport just tossed his luggage over the fence and then just climbed over it and started running towards his plane. He was caught within a minute, flight was delayed, and the place was searched due to security breach. I don't get what this guy was thinking in first place, and in second place, I don't get how he got over approximately 3 meters tall fence with razor wire on top. He was hurt on his hands though, according to the guy that was leading the security check. 2. An airport employee that got to tourniquet door. Employees have their own entrances. Normally you would use your security card plus PIN and it would unlock. Apparently this guy either forgot his PIN or his card stopped working, so he just started to kick the door. Obviously it didn't help as those doors are made to withstand it, so he smashed the fire alarm button, which opens the door. He got big fine, lost his job, and now he is shown as the dumbest employee during security check. Story 75. I was working in a men club, and we had cameras in the back where the private dances took place. We had a strict no touching policy at the club, hence the cameras. I think it would be a toss-up between seeing a sad old fat man pull out his 3-inch junk and start furiously do it, or watching a hippie throw up on the hottest dancer on the roster while she was giving him a private dance. Story 76. Saw a mother holding her son in a headlock. Officers who reported on scene and recording prior to seeing that showed that the son punched his sister in the face twice, then the mom once. In order to get him to stop, she held him in a headlock. Police arrive, and after stopping the fighting, the son decides to just walk away and not listen to the cop, which very promptly got him arrested. He was asked for his name from the officer, and he responded, "My junk." Got all of us laughing. Seriously a ducked-up kid, but that was a bit funny considering every day is super boring and mostly nothing happens. Story 77. Not a security guard, but when I was a manager of a convenience store, I once watched some footage of a stock trolley just wandering around the warehouse by itself. It wasn't just going in one direction like it was rolling down a slight decline. It was going all over. Creepy. In the same store, the chiller blinds, pulled down over the fridge cabinets at night to keep the cold in and save energy, used to rise up behind me as I walked down the aisle to the office. They had awkward clips underneath, so were fiddly to open. Never happened to anyone else. I don't miss that place. Story 78. This is a creepy story. I work at a factory that makes clothes and other things. Anyway, I was doing my usual job on the night shift. I kept hearing doors opening and closing, and I didn't think much about it. That was a stupid decision. I was doing college homework on my laptop until I look at the camera monitor and see a man just standing there, staring at the camera, not even moving or talking at all. There was a window behind my office, not so high up, so I jumped and ran. I called the police, but He was never caught. Just glad I could finally share this story, story 79. When I was in high school, I would chat with the security guard sometimes, just friendly conversation. One day he's like, "Come watch this." And he shows me a video on the security cameras of the lunchroom with kids eating. Everything seemed normal at first, and then all of a sudden, someone comes in wearing a gorilla mask. He starts climbing on tables and walking around where people are trying to eat. Needless to say, they got in trouble. Story 80. I work the gates at a fairly large distribution center. During the weekends, I'm the only person in the building, and at this point, I've just stopped monitoring the building's inside cameras from all the weird flashes I've seen from the corners of my eyes. Walking in the building, I've heard footsteps and crap behind me on the weekends, so I basically sprint to the bathroom and back when I need to. Story 81. Not even a security guard, but worked the night shift, and I had to review the security footage. Someone dressed up as Pennywise was wandering around and was just staring at the camera. He held it for about 30 minutes and just walked away. Found out later that he thought that I was off that day and that the other guy who would do substances was working that night. Story 82. Not a guard, but I had seen a video where some little kid took a crap in the store. Another kid, likely his sister, caught him and gave him something to wipe his butt. In the video, it's actually a group of guys, mostly off-screen, talking about the video. The kid's parents weren't anywhere in sight. Story 83. I used to work in a parking garage, and I always laughed out loud when I saw someone so engrossed in their phone, they walk into things like the yellow bar at exit, or glass doors, or cement pillars. Story 84. Two people ducking in furry costumes behind our main office but not on our property, so we couldn't do anything about it. I'm pretty sure it was two guys. Story 85. I once saw a girl walk around our store, pick her nose, taste it, then her unaware BF turned around and started kissing her, and she just went with it. Story 86. Work at a casino resort. I was in the office and a supervisor was checking out a camera for our resort lawn because the front desk called, saying some guests were being loud. Note it was 11 p.m. On the camera was some usual people sitting around drinking in the chairs. Suddenly, two guys come running from off camera, and one jumps on there, others back, but both guys appear to be naked. In the seconds to follow, about 4 more men show up running around, all appearing naked. My supervisor just looks at me and I'm like, I'll go check it out. When I got down there, I found the 6 guys on the lawn. Turns out they were wearing banana hammock leotards, and the color was close enough to skin color that we just couldn't tell on camera. Anyways, the guys then grabbed a lawn chair with a leg rest part and started carrying it down to the beach. We make contact and pretty much say the duck. We then tell them that their outfits are not okay and to go put clothes on. The guys complied, but then some drunk chick that was with the group goes off on me and another security guard. What did they do wrong? Their junks are covered, so it doesn't matter. She then tries to get in one of the guards' faces and pulls out her phone, saying that she will call her lawyer and sue the casino. A different guy in the group just tells her to shut up and go to the room before she gets them all kicked out. It was a weird night.